Julia A. Pierson, a longtime Secret Service agent, has been tagged as the first woman to head that agency, whose mission is in part to protect the president and vice president. President Barack Obama continues his trend of hiring women to lead law enforcement agencies, including the Marshals Service and the Drug Enforcement Administration. To take a look inside the Secret Service and the implications of this appointment, we're joined by Jeffrey Adicott, professor of law and the director of St. Mary's University Center for Terrorism Law. Welcome, Dr. Adicott.
Hey.
So probably a strange first question, but is this actually a significant appointment? Does the fact that Julia Pierson is a woman matter? And if so, who does it matter to?
Well, again, I think there's two issues. One, we all know that in many instances we are plagued with the virus of political correctness. And my be, is she being appointed because of her sex, or is she being appointed because of her abilities? And I think the real question that we have here is whether or not that's the case. And that's very concerning for a lot of people, because I think it is an important agency. The Secret Service, their task is to protect the president, the commander-in-chief, and they have a very tough job to do. So she's been a long-term employee or part of the Secret Service for many years. I've got to believe that she has earned this position by her ability and not by the virtue of her sex.
And you were talking about politics, so I have to ask about the recent scandals, including the infamous Colombian prostitution one. Do you think that this appointment might be made to counter some of those scandals, a person who couldn't possibly have been implicated in them?
Well, again, females are less likely to engage in those types of scandals, I suppose, just by the nature of how the good Lord has made the difference between males and females, if we want to put it that way. So that might be a factor that is kind of a signal to the mostly male-dominated Secret Service that that these types of things will not be tolerated, and that could have played into the decision. But politics is politics, and if that did play into the decision, that might be a valid factor, and it might send a signal to the entire organization that your job is to be a professional, to conduct yourself in accordance with these standards, and not to be trapped by your own prurient interests.
Now, you mentioned that the Secret Service is male-dominated, and in fact, amongst the special agents, the 3,500 special agents, 90% of them are male. Will that in itself potentially pose a problem? Is there a certain level of machismo which she may have to overcome?
It might. It depends on her, her own character and how she's going to deal with that. And the reason that the majority are males is because, just like in some of the other professions, you need to have someone that has the physical abilities to do their job. And of course, political correctness has seeped into that as well. But at the end of the day, that's why, for example, at the Olympics, we have male and female events. That's why our sporting events, you don't see any females in the National Basketball Association or the football leagues because physically they can't do it. And I think we need to notice that reality. And so it's not a bad thing that the Secret Service is 90% male-dominated. That's just the reality of what they're supposed to do. But it could be challenging to a degree, but I think most of these individuals are professionals. They realize that the person at the top is not engaging in physical activities of protection. They're administering the Secret Service, and that's a job for the brain, so to speak. And there's no differences in terms of brain power between males and females.
And with that, we also know that she served on George H. Bush's protective team, so she can at least speak to some firsthand experience of what agents might go through and what they need to think about in terms of how to strategically organize to protect a president, vice president, or their families, right?
Absolutely. And I think that's the good thing is that she was apparently not promoted beyond her capability. She's served time in the trenches, and we do have excellent female agents that can do many of the physical demands, and she has done that. She's earned her stripes, so to speak. I think if you were to pull someone that hadn't been in the trenches and put them on top, I think many people would be objecting to that because clearly they'd say, well, we know why you got the job. It wasn't because of your ability.
Now, we hinted a little bit at what her role would be, what her chief responsibilities of the job would be, and maybe because it's the Secret Service, we don't totally know what responsibilities are, but what do we think is the role that she will have to serve?
Well, a lot of leaderships, in these positions, these agencies, you set the standard of behavior. You inspect what you expect. You demand professionalism. And if she can do that, then she's doing her job, because that's what you have to have. You have to realize that there are humans that make up any organization, and X amount of those people need discipline. They need to have training. They need to have oversight. And if she's willing to do those activities and functions, then she's the right person for the job.
And what is the mission of the modern Secret Service?
Well, their primary mission is to protect the president and protect other individuals that are in those positions of power. And we know that there are many people out there that wish to do our public figures harm, and so they have to be on their toes. They have to be alert. They have to do their job with alacrity and professionalism. That's their primary function, is to provide physical security to our top leadership.
And when we say protecting them from harm, are we strictly talking about physical harm, or these days do we also have to include that realm of virtual harm?
Well, primarily it's physical harm, but obviously we are very aware of cyber issues and cyber security as well, because it's not just putting a bomb somewhere or shooting somebody. You can actually do great harm by hacking into a cyber system of some sort and causing a traffic light, for example, to turn red to green, so you're going to have a traffic accident just as that motorcade goes through the system. So they have to be far more sophisticated than the old days, where you just pack a gun and carry a vest.
Now, it's one thing to arrange an event and make sure it's secure here in Washington, D.C., or even where you are in Texas. But as we all know from last week, if nothing else, the president goes everywhere around the world. Could her gender be a hindrance overseas?
Oh, absolutely. There are many countries in the world that do not recognize the reality that females and males, there are no differences in terms of the mentality. For example, in Saudi Arabia, if you're going to fly to Saudi Arabia, a female is not going to pick you up at the airport. They're not allowed to drive, which is gross discrimination against females in many, many countries around the world. And so that's an issue. But I think many countries understand that we do not share those ideas that are disoriented to the reality of what you're dealing with. We've had secretaries of state that have been female, both in this administration, the previous administration, and we basically are demanding that these countries deal with the people that we appointed, and we back our ambassadors or secretaries of state with the full authority of the United States of America. So these countries, we're kind of bringing them into the 21st century in that degree.
Now, unlike Secretary of State, this position does not need to be confirmed by the Senate. Once the president decides this is my person, they've got the job as long as they accept it. Given that, if you were offered this job, what would be some of the first things you would need to do, you would want to do?
I'd require retraining and training of all employees to understand what your job is. I would reinforce the professional standards. I would communicate to the entire organization that anyone that strays from these standards, I will put a stake in your heart, and you will be discharged immediately, because we don't need to have the public image that we've had under the Obama administration, where the Secret Service had been out partying, so to speak, and engaging in activities with prostitutes. So that did great harm, even though it didn't. We can argue whether it affected the safety of the president or his entourage. It certainly affected the reputation of the Secret Service.
Whether we talk about the Secret Service or whether we talk about anti-terrorist intelligence units, one of the difficult things I imagine is that it's pretty much demanded that you have a 100 batting average or 1.00 batting average. Is that fair? Is that just a reality of the gig when you take it on?
Well, it is, and that's why you have overlapping security systems. You just don't have one security setup. You have Plan A, Plan B, and Plan C that are all put into effect. They just have to be wrong one time for great harm to occur, as we saw with President Reagan. So it's a job that requires that you put everything into the job, and we screen the applicants so we get the best and the brightest to do the job.
And who does she have to work with immediately? Does she immediately have to get into conferences with the FBI and CIA? Who are her main partners?
Yeah, partners are going to be all the folks in the national security arena. If the president goes overseas, then you're dealing with also the security apparatus of foreign countries, the host nation. So you've got the usual folks here in the homeland, which is the CIA, the FBI, the DHS, Department of Homeland Security, and the DCA and national command authorities, and again also other security systems from other nations.
And probably the final question, how important is it, at least initially, to repair the image of the Secret Service versus focus on making sure that the job itself is done and not worrying about the PR side?
Well, the job obviously comes first, but the PR side has to be corrected, and perhaps that's one of the reasons that she was appointed, because there's many qualified individuals who can fill those shoes. But it might be a signal to the organization that this is why you have a female, because I'm making it very clear to you that the activities that have gone on before will not continue. And if that's one of the reasons, I think that's okay given what occurred with the Secret Service. But I think the primary reason for her appointment has to be her ability and capability.
Taking a look at the first woman who's been appointed to lead the Secret Service, I'm at...